Hi guys, what's going on? My name is Alex, I'm an architect in London, and in this video we'll look into the principles behind a good office design. So I actually have been looking forward to making this video for quite some time, and the reason for that is because I have been moving places quite a lot, and what I find is that every time you move to the new flat or new apartment, the work environment that's available is quite limiting. And with this video I thought I'll do a little thought exercise and to see what my dream office space could potentially look one day. Okay, so let's first look at the principles behind a good office space design. And so the first one is the elimination of friction. Now, friction can be any type of thing that prevents you from doing your work straight away. So for example, you might find that the thing or a gadget that you're looking for, that you need to do your work, is missing. And so instead of kind of diving straight into the workflow, you're wasting time searching for that thing. Now, the second principle is about maximizing the space. Because home office spaces tend to be such a small spaces, you really want to make sure to use every bit of that space as wisely as possible. So the things that you want to focus when maximizing the space is the clever use of space, avoiding space waste, and its minimal number of things that you put in your space. Because adding things to your office space, unless they have specific use, will mean having more clutter in it. And the final principle of a good office space design is the user-centric approach. So the things to consider here is the use cases. You know, who is the person that is using these spaces? For example, the requirements of young professional might be vastly different from somebody who is in a high school. Then it's about figuring out what are the needs and wants, because there will be critical things that are needed in any office, like a desk, a screen, a good source of light, and then the wants are those features that are, strictly speaking, not entirely necessary for a good operation of the office space. The deciding factor between the needs and wants usually comes down to the budget, because usually people only have that much they can afford before it becomes a bit too painful to go for every single feature that they would ideally like. Okay, so now that we know our guiding principles behind a good office space design, it's time to look into how we can integrate these features into the actual design. And the way to do that is using a concept. So the concept is really a principle of spatial organization. Now, a good spatial concept is rooted in two things: the functional dimension and the experiential dimension. Now, these two dimensions are actually quite integrated together, and it's difficult to consider one without another. But for the purposes of this video, I'll start with the functional aspect first. I'll use this example of the space that I designed previously. This would be my ideal office environment. My office space is quite big compared to the relatively smaller office spaces. It's about 4.5 by 5 meters. And this is quite generous, but it is my dream workspace. That's why they're so big. The other thing about this space is the window over here. It's a very large window and it's north facing, so that the sun that kind of comes around like so, the light that you get is kind of diffused and therefore it's less intrusive. The position of the desk is at the corner over here, and I chose the space specifically because of its relationship to the space itself. It's at the corner here, so when you sit on a chair, your back is always against the wall, your left corner is also kind of protected, and the views are right towards the outside. And again, this is one of those personal decisions, because not everybody might like the view to the outside, because it can be distracting to see something behind the plane of the monitors. And I also make a distinction between the standing desk over here, which would be hooked to the computer, and the stationary desk on this side for all the secondary kind of activities like drawings and modeling. And in this space as well, I wanted a clear circulation so that when I enter the office, I can get to my desk quite easily without many abstractions. And so this whole area here becomes a circulation area. And circulation area is really just a fancy term for the area that cannot be used for anything else apart from moving. It has this kind of progression where you enter the room, you see the views outside, you then look in your office desk, and there's this whole kind of experiential dimension that starts to creep into this. You know, it's a ritual. It's not just just you opening the door and sitting by your desk. The other element that I would quite like to have in my office space is the ability to change the work environment a little bit. And the way I do that is by introducing a sofa with a little coffee desk. And this is so that, you know, whenever I feel more creative, or I have a phone call to make, or perhaps there is an article I need to read, or something that doesn't require a computer or sitting by the desk that needs to be done, I can then move to the couch. And there's a little lamp over here that's all about giving the evening reading light. And lastly, what I have is I have my storage units over here, which consist of the bookshelf here and a little kind of cupboard shelfy thing over here. And then there is also another door, which would be a door into the storage space for all the items that I don't need on daily basis. And last but not least is this external terrace to the outside. That's again just a little nice to have feature that creates a connection between the external space and the internal space. It's that kind of an in-between space that could be used for, again, things like contemplation, having phone calls, and just having a bit more creative dimension to this whole office space. Okay, so now that we looked into the functional aspect of this space, it's time to look into the experiential dimension. And I'll do that by putting the perspective image of the same space that I've created in SketchUp. I'll turn down the opacity a little bit to create a spatial atmosphere, starting with the pencil first. Okay, so when it comes to experiential dimension, people oftentimes put the horse before the cart, in that they go right into the mood board and they go into the color selection and what kind of features are going to be in their space. And they completely miss the point that you have to go and start with the practical aspects first, because if you cannot plan the space properly, chances are that you're not going to be able to integrate all those wishes. Having said that, considering purely practical aspect of any space is going to be detrimental to the experience of the space, because the space can be laid out really well, but it might not have any character, and therefore it's not going to be a pleasant experience for people to be in that space. So there's this balance that we as designers need to tread when designing spaces. So for this specific room, we're gonna have 4 main colors / textures that we're gonna be using. So the first one we're probably gonna use is some sort of shade of timber that we're gonna apply to our floors. So for the floor, we'll go for the brownie type of color, and then we can go for the dark gray / black for the couch, leather, all the electric appliances, the seat, lamp, window frames, etc. Probably doors as well. The third material, I'm not gonna shade that in, but it'll be the plasterboard for the ceiling and the walls. And then we also might have like a very light gray for things like these curtains and the carpet. Okay, so now the main colors are done. It's time to color them in, and I'll start with the marker tool. And now that we have all our props kind of sorted out, have all the little details drawn in, final step for this is to add the atmosphere. I'm going to do that by having like a little subtle brush stroke all around the image. If you're curious about more design techniques, then check out this video over here. This video is about how to design a residential house completely from scratch. And in this video, I go through some design techniques for design on a restricted, constrained site in densely populated areas. And this video jumps into things like concept, the context, and how to analyze the site before then propose something on it. So make sure to check that video out, and I'll see you in the next video.